a good holiday season and a Happy New Year. This is our last meeting of 2013, right? Yeah, it flies by. 3 words that I mentioned before: membership, or 2, membership and volunteers. You can get the information in the back for those of you who came in. Our speaker tonight comes with warm recommendations from many places. Briem is a regional economist with the program in Urban and Regional Analysis at the University of Pitt. He's going to talk to us in a nice companion piece to what Helen did last month, where she talked about, shall I call it, the poetry of Squirrel Hill. Tonight we're going to get to hear the numbers on Squirrel Hill from Chris. Chris is a long-term native of Bloomfield and still lives there. Went away for a while and then came back, and we welcome you to our stage.
Okay, thank you. I will use this if I have to. I think you all can hear me. If not, I will go ahead and use this. I apologize. I have about 40 or 50 slides, so you guys might not quite have the best angle for it. So, okay. So here's your last chance to look at Pittsburgh from space. So I struggle with the title, so I'll just tell you, this is a little bit of everything. It's about everything and it's about nothing. Maybe just a little back up. A little bit of thanks to my colleague and friend Adam Shear at the University of Pittsburgh in Religious Studies, who put together a program last year on Jewish Squirrel Hill, and as for him I put together an amalgam of what I know about Squirrel Hill as someone who studies neighborhoods in Pittsburgh and change. And we just put that all together for Pittsburgh. So he sponsored that original bit of research, so I thank him. And I think it was Helen who heard that, or you heard of it. And I'm glad to go through it again. You'll see my undergraduate, Ethan Gus Wires, was an undergraduate, long since gone. But if you ever run into him, you'll know that he is also now a Squirrel Hill expert. So I'm going to cover a lot of things, and I'll tell you there's not one real theme here. I'm going to go through I'm going to go through a little bit of what it means to talk about neighborhoods versus the city versus the region. Pittsburgh is a great.
Chris, is dark okay, or do you need your?
So I think dark's okay. This is going to be all pictures and all slides, so I got 40 slides. So.
In the back, can you put some light on?
I'm good. I mean, whatever you guys want is fine as well.
We want to see your face a little bit.
No.
There you go. That's right. That's
So, I'm going to talk about some geography just to spur our knowledge. This is really a talk about Pittsburgh in general. I mean, we live in neighborhoods. I'm here to talk about Squirrel Hill, but really it's about change and growth and change in the city of Pittsburgh, in the Pittsburgh region. More broadly, I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to cover some demographics. I'm going to talk about transportation, housing. I'm going to talk about everything at one point, and I'll be glad to take questions as we go, or if you want to wait till we're done, I'm sure you all have comments on some of the things I'm going to cover. And then once we go through the state of Squirrel Hill today, maybe, with some history, how we got here is always very important. I'll talk about my look into the future and what that means in terms of all these other changes going on. You probably don't need to hear this. Just why I'm here. If you ever are interested, as some of you have already asked me, or if you're interested in neighborhood research or work, we have a program in urban and regional analysis at our research center, the University Center for Social and Urban Research. So this is what I and some colleagues, I do some other things too, but we have, I and my colleagues, we really drill down into what's going on in city of Pittsburgh neighborhoods. I'll tell you, it's a good thing. We don't actually spend a lot of time talking about Squirrel Hill as much as some other neighborhoods. It's just the nature of, I guess, what people need, in that, we tend to study places that have bigger problems more than places that don't. I think if I'll just tell you the punchline of today, that Squirrel Hill is a very healthy and thriving neighborhood, certainly by however you want to measure that. So we often don't need a lot of sort of the intense study that we do in a lot of our neighborhoods that may not be, that may have some challenges going forward, if you put it that way. So anyway, so who we are, neighborhood information are us. If you want any more information about that, I have some cards. I'll be glad to give them out when we're done. I probably stole this picture from you guys, just so you know. I left it in here. And this, Michael's already pointed out, I am from Bloomfield. I leave this in there because these visual cues, you know, you guys all probably know where this is, right?
Yeah, I know.
Do we have a consensus? It's Forbes and
Shady.
Shady, Murray, either way?
Shady.
Okay.
That's a broad.
I will tell you, so, and this is just the point of, so I again, born and raised in Bloomfield, and people would tell me for many years, this is now maybe a decade or so ago, that things were really changing. And I could stand there in a corner and look around and say, yeah, well, I was born there, and I was baptized there, I went to school there, and the visual cues all looked very much the same to me. So even I, as a hopefully semi-trained observer, wouldn't quite believe that there was in fact tremendous demographic change going on, and that the people who lived in Bloomfield when I was growing up, you know, it either moved away or passed on. All these changes that happened, and the people who were moving in were really not what had been typical for so long. You know, it's not the kids following their parents. The kids moved, but I finally realized that the parents that had moved, and there were very different people moving in. So there's a lot of people change going on that we don't always see here in Pittsburgh, because a lot of our visual cues look very much the same. We can still identify this corner. You know, I used to remember, I'm not forgetting off the top of my head what year this probably was, but look at the cars, we can date this. You know, we're talking a century ago. There are plenty of very few places in this country that you go back 100 years that you so very quickly identify where we are. So I usually preface, when I'm not talking neighborhoods, I'm talking about the city or the region more broadly. Just so you know, I like this picture a lot. This is our big new positive version of Pittsburgh. We're all a little bit a lot of nabobism. We're a little bit pessimists. Those who've been here a long time don't realize all the positive press that's going on elsewhere. This came out in 2010. If you were flying, this was an insert into Delta Airlines, and it had this big picture. Pittsburgh, the comeback city. 2010. I know you. I used to have fun with this picture by saying it's a great picture, right? But anyone know what was wrong with this picture? You got to look at the date and think about it for a minute. The fountain was running. There's Photoshop for you. This is just perfect. You know, I mean, someone just drew that in there in anticipation. So I used to make fun of my friends who probably did that downtown at the conference who did that. But now, since it's on, you know, they were just anticipating the future. They like to be prepared. So there's a lot of change going on in Pittsburgh. I mean, again, this is probably not a headline, you know, you would have seen, you know, I was going to say a decade, 20, 30 years ago, there was no comeback. We were still sort of experiencing the economic decline. I spent most of my time studying the decline of the steel industry and how we moved beyond that. But quite honestly, there probably wasn't this headline 5 years ago. And so there's a lot of stuff going on. People are noticing Pittsburgh in a positive light for the first time ever for many folks far away. This really isn't so important here. I just want to point this out. I mean, what is Pittsburgh? People will get confused. I was actually at a funeral this morning in Mount Lebanon, and the sermon was all about how the deceased was so positive about Pittsburgh. He was, you know, he could have been elected mayor. But we were living in Mount Lebanon. This is someone who was born and raised in Mount Lebanon. They were talking about sort of this Pittsburgh construct. What is Pittsburgh, the city or the region? I have some data in here. Sometimes I'm talking about just so you know, a little bit aside on Squirrel topics, but you know, you know, here's the city of Pittsburgh. This is what often I talk about in terms of the region. It's 7 counties in southwestern Pennsylvania. And a lot of what you read or talk about, you'll see people confuse the two all the time. Is Pittsburgh the city? Is Pittsburgh the region? I've been downtown at City Hall, people calling up saying, I need my potholes fixed. But they live in Bellevue. You know, they don't quite understand, you know, that we have these municipalities out there or whatever. I just want you to understand that as I go forward. I'm mostly going to be talking about the city. But, you know, there's some very different things in terms of the demographics or the economics down the road. You might be hearing one thing. If you ever hear anything I say, it doesn't sound like, doesn't jive with something else you hear. They might be talking about a different geography, just to begin with. But there's the city of Pittsburgh. You know, our great 90 or so neighborhoods. I lose track how many we have currently. You know, our neighborhoods are really much a construction of ourselves. We define them. There's no law that says neighborhoods should be what they are. Well, again, when I live closer to Bloomfield, I had an attorney call me last year saying he wanted the city to change the definition, the geographic boundaries of friendship. I'm like, well, that's nice, but you know, I mean, why was sort of my answer. But we care a lot. I mean, we care a lot. There's fighting words of where one neighborhood ends and one begins. Again, that's true in a lot of places, but I would argue a lot more true here. We really have retained an identity to our neighborhoods that is not quite as common, certainly over the long haul. These sort of, I mean, the neighborhood names have changed a little bit over time, but not really all that much. I mean, you can go back 80 years and you'll still see most of our neighborhoods and the identities of them pretty consistent. A few have changed. You know what the backside of Mount Washington used to be called? Ever hear of Chicken Hill? You know, a few other things. And there's some neighborhoods that aren't called. There are a few, and these are 90 right now. There's some that aren't here. I mean, you guys south of here, what's a Duck Hollow? Down there, you know? Not really an official city neighborhood, but certainly sort of its own unique place. Up in Oakland, Panther Hollow. If you ever been down there, kind of its own unique place, separate, whatever. So, ward map. So I'm going to mostly be talking about, you know, this definition of Squirrel Hill. It may not be what everyone here agrees on. These are the city definitions of Squirrel Hill and north and south. So two distinct neighborhoods, and whether it makes sense to talk about them individually or collectively, you know, is a metaphysical question. As you see, I'm going to go through a bunch of data. You'll see there are a lot of distinctions, mostly because of where, I'll just lay it out, you'll see it in almost every slide I put up there. The concentration of where the students are living certainly congregates far more in the north and the south as you edge up in Oakland. That impacts almost any sort of quantitative description of either of the neighborhoods. And it's good to keep that in mind just to understand what's going on. But I know my good friends at the 14th Ward, you know, some of you in politics committee, that's another whole definition of this general area that goes even beyond this. So there's no one answer. So a lot of show and tell. Let me just flip through a few things. This is a picture of density in the city of Pittsburgh, how many people live per square mile. And you can just sort of tell, I just highlighted the color red are the places that are the most dense, and then the colors shade out to where there's less dense. I've taken away the neighborhood boundaries, you know, just to give us a general feel. And by and large, where you guys, just so you know, I mean, this is Oakland, the students that really sort of, they live on top of each other, right? But generally speaking, this whole dark area in the East End, I mean, that's Shady Side and Squirrel Hill, you know, some of the densest part of the city. You know, as you go off to the west and the south, you'll see places that are much more challenged for maintaining population density, places where people want to live, and the housing stock and all the things that go into that. But, you know, this has maintained a desirability to live that is reflective of population density across the city of Pittsburgh. But this is about history, right? Historical society. So here's some, go back, I'm just laying this out. You know, a lot of growth and change, but a lot of consistency in city neighborhoods. These are the top city of Pittsburgh neighborhoods in 1950 by number of people. So you can look at the numbers if you want, but pay attention and look at the rankings. You know, so Squirrel Hill South at the time. It's not fair to compare all neighborhoods the same. They're of different sizes. So I mean, it's not really to say this ranking says much in and of itself, but there's 1950. And here's the last, you know, most recent data that we should probably trust from 2010. And so, what was first in 1950? Squirrel Hill South. First in 2010, again, still Squirrel Hill. And not only that, by 2010, we get Squirrel Hill North sort of creeping up the line. And some of the ones that were there in 1950, there's my home, Bloomfield, used to be very dense. I think it's still remained a very viable place, but certainly nowhere near the population density that it once had. So there's
one question.
Can you just explain what the boundaries are of Squirrel Hill South and Squirrel Hill North, please?
Well, I should have brought another map to do that really well. You know, this is just the broad outline. That's not going to tell you that. So the difference between Squirrel Hill South and Squirrel Hill North is pretty much Forbes, right? I mean, this line here is mostly Forbes. It's not really Forbes. as you go down south, I need a better map to really show you. Before what kicks off before you get into Greenfield and farther west, and then over, what we call, I thought this is what Regent Square and stuff, which is also odd. If you ever go down there, do you ever see the sign? If you go down Bragg, it says Parks. What's it called?
White Park?
No,
Park Place.
Frick.
Park Place. I have friends who live over there. Park Place, which is a neighborhood that also doesn't come up in the list of city Pittsburgh neighborhoods. I'll have to bring another map to sort of the line, street by street or line by line, where it is. The point is, it's a bit arbitrary. I mean, these are there's no. The city of Pittsburgh is defined by a articles of incorporation. Trust me, it's down to a T where you are. City neighborhoods are self-defined by the city, and the actual boundaries have changed semi-arbitrarily over the years. If you actually sort of were to nitpick what they do down in city planning, which is where the lines are drawn. So I don't have a complete answer for you at the moment, but Forbes is the difference pretty much for most of it. So anyway, so biggest neighborhood is 50, biggest neighborhood is now, again, just the general point, this is, again, a neighborhood that is retained. Not that the total numbers are down, right? And that's may or may not reflect sort of change. Like we lived in larger households, larger families. The density across everywhere was much higher in the past, especially in dense urban cores. So saying that there were 20,000 people in Squirrel South in 1950 versus 15,000 now is not in any sense to me a sign of sort of decline in an economic sense or a sociological sense. Families are smaller, or even different types of families. Maybe slightly older families, the kids have moved out. You can easily see changes on that scale going forward. So I have to explain this chart just a little bit. So this is showing two things: the population of the city of Pittsburgh and the population of Squirrel Hill. And this, I've combined both Squirrel Hills, the north and south. I've normalized it, so these on the left isn't any real number. It's just I just want to compare where we've been since 1940. So this is a way to look at relative change over time. So obviously the city of Pittsburgh is bigger than the neighborhood, but I just sort of made them both 1.0 back there in 1940. And basically, so here's the city. Cities suffered a lot. People have moved out to the suburbs. People have moved away from the region. You often hear this factoid. It gets repeated. We were a city of about 600,000 people, in 1950, give or take. We're now down to about half that, and that's why you see this number going from 1 down here below, about 0.5, give or take. The city itself has shrunk, but now look at what's happened to Squirrel Hill over that time. It actually continued to increase while the city was flat. It certainly maintained a lot of its growth. It's down a little bit. Overall, but nowhere near collectively, north and south, Squirrel Hill north and south. But honestly, there are very few neighbors in the city of Pittsburgh that have maintained that type of, retained as much of their population as Squirrel Hill has over such a long time, right? We're talking 70 years now. That's 70 years that included all that vast suburbanization of the population and all this other stuff going on. So on that sheet with the long-term trend, just to talk about a recent trend, this is a map of all the neighborhoods of the city of Pittsburgh over how much growth over the last 10 years. And people get mad, so the colors are green for good and purple for not so good. People get mad. If I put red up there, they get all mad. They don't like seeing their neighborhoods in red. But nonetheless, I mean, for you guys here, there is a little bit of decline in Squirrel North, but there's been growth. The story is, we could talk a lot about growth and change in the city as a whole. By and large, there's been decline over this decade. There's been decline over the last 50 years in the city of Pittsburgh. We can argue over whether there's a little bit or a growth of late. At best, there's probably some stabilization in the city overall. But nonetheless, a lot of that decline. Look at some of the dark areas. Some of these dark areas are where you really see parts of the city declining. Almost all of the southern part of the city, seeing continuing population decline through the last decade. Almost everything north of the river, with maybe the exception of stuff close in on the North Shore. The West End, again, mostly there are a little bit of weird pockets of growth. But look in here, the East End, Squirrel Hill, closer into Oakland, Shady Side. These are all places that are they're growing. They've increased in population over the last 10 years. There's Green Island in the Strip District. I'll tell you, that's a little different. That's actually just a place that didn't have anyone living there, 10 years ago, and as we've started to build it, you probably see in some of the news, there's condos being built, and some other things going on. So they've gone from no numbers to anything. It looks like a lot of growth. It's still relatively unpopulated over there, but not in the same sense. Nonetheless, in terms of real hard numbers, I mean, these are all real, places that have shown real population growth. So, you see? So, same picture I showed a minute ago. I just wanted to do one more thing and split out the two neighborhoods, Squirrel Hill North and Squirrel Hill South. So here's the city of Pittsburgh again, that sort of continuing decline. There hasn't really been much abatement. We can argue about what's going on right here in the last couple of years. There is something going on. I mean, and again, a lot of it comes down to the students. If you break out Squirrel Hill North, there's been such an expansion of the enrollment in a lot of the institutions around here, not just CMU and Pitt, Chatham, and all that around here. As they've expanded, well, I mean, students are people too. We count them in population counts. So you'll see what's going on here. Look at this red. This is Squirrel Hill North. I mean, so if you think there are more students running around than there were 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, you're right. I mean, and they're living here. They're not all living in the dorms. I mean, at least where I work, Pitt in particular, CMU, maybe a little less so, but has been challenged to house all the students they have. So, like a lot of urban institutions, a lot of those that student base is living out in the community. Students aren't traveling very far. They're going to live close in, and certainly, especially on the graduate students, they tend to you wind up capturing a lot of them in Squirrel Hill North, but undergraduates too. It's all across the board. But so there's the red showing what's going on. Not all that's going on. That's why you sort of see up and down. But the positive part of that, I think it's been pretty continuously growth in the student population. Come on. Don't break on me. Don't worry, if it breaks, we're just going to do this. We're okay? We're okay? We're all good? Give us a second here. There we go. There, we're doing well. We're doing well. My battery might be not. Oh. Sorry. I was doing so well too, wasn't I? This is not your problem. This is something wrong with my thing with anything else. There we go. There we go. We're back on track now. So anyway, so I'm telling you that there are a lot of people moving here, or at least there are some people moving in. There's some growth in Squirrel Hill. I'm going to skip slightly wrong order. So let me show you something else that's going on here in the city of Pittsburgh, and this has made some news. You've probably all heard over and over again over the last decades how old a region this is. A lot of people aged, a certain age, and it is certainly true that as a region, what happened 30 years ago, 30, 40 years ago now in some cases, a lot of job loss forced a lot of people in certain generations, certain age cohorts to leave the region. That's sort of why Pittsburgh shows up as relatively older. We kind of, if you were older, you didn't leave. You didn't have the same options to pick up and move for a job as someone who was younger. We really became a very old region. This is a picture of the percentage age 65 and over in the city of Pittsburgh, which is the red. Allegheny County, which is this grayish line. It's not quite sure what color it's meant to be. And this is the U.S. And the U.S. story is baby boom generation has been getting older. All these news stories of baby boom generation is just entering elderly. The first ones are just becoming 65, eligible for Social Security and all that. So this number's been tromping up all this time. And it's going to keep going up for a while. We're going to gradually get much older as the nation goes forward. Allegheny County just sort of in between here. But look at the city of Pittsburgh. The city of Pittsburgh actually peaked, and the region peaked in terms of the proportion elderly about 15 years ago. It's actually been coming down. For the city of Pittsburgh, the proportion elderly has been coming down. And if you look real close at this last year of data, which is 2012, let's say 2013, that's a lie, 2012, the city of Pittsburgh has actually just fallen below the relative proportion elderly than the nation. So you can make the case that the city of Pittsburgh, at least the city, not the region, and not the county, but the city of Pittsburgh is, whatever that old metric is, old factoid is, the city of Pittsburgh is now actually a bit younger, if you want to think of it that way, than the nation as a whole. So there's a lot of stuff going on in that demographic that's worth thinking about. Here, a lot of demographic change. Probably not worth dwelling on too much. I mean, a lot of our neighborhoods that were used to be very old are now changing pretty rapidly. Probably the one I'll just talk about a little bit is Lawrenceville. I will tell you that 10 years ago, Lawrenceville was one of the oldest neighborhoods in the country. You want everybody to think about that? And a lot between demographic change, people moving in, all sorts of stuff going on. It's rapidly become one of the youngest. So that's sort of what's going on here. I'll just leave that be for a minute. Part of what's going on, there are people moving into the region. I'm going to get to more Squirrel stuff in a minute, I promise. So here I'm talking about the region, which if you go back to my 7-county map at the beginning, just so you understand, for the region as a whole. This is how many people have been moving out on net. A whole bunch of people move in and move out every year. So the net migration is whether you're growing or shrinking because of migration. A lot of people move in every year, a lot of people move out. Population changes based on which flow is bigger, the out migration or the in-migration. And what you'll see here is all this red, all these years up to 2007 or so, always red. If you actually went back in time, it's always been red. It's been red since probably the 40s or the 30s even. And a lot of us have looked. Like I said, I'm from here. We're here during the 1980s. We really suffered a whole lot of people leaving. So this is about 8,000 people a year more leaving than coming. If you were actually looking at 1980, it'd be about 50,000. So not here, it'd be down there somewhere. A lot of our demographics are coming. But here's the positive story. I'm not trying to depress you. In the last 5 years, this is data only through 2011, so we have probably a couple more years beyond this. There are more people moving to Pittsburgh, the region, than moving away. So I show this a lot, and I showed this slide actually last week to an OSHA class over at Pitt, and the guy in the back he didn't believe it. I mean, people just don't believe me when I say this. I mean, there's a reason people don't believe it because it's not been true for so long, but it's also not a recent phenomenon. Again, we are now, this is 4 years a day, I guarantee you, we're in our 6th straight year of more people moving into Pittsburgh than moving away. So it's not even a news story. So even after 6 years, people still don't believe you. So we're a hard crowd to convince. People vote. People vote with their feet for the most part. So I mean, a lot of things that go into that. When economic times were bad, a lot of people left. It's probably reflecting, relatively better times, at least relative to a lot of other places. People are finding opportunities here and really moving. So again, I think right now, if you actually extend this out, I have other data to collaborate this. Again, we're probably in our 6th year at least, and no reason to think it's turning around soon of more people moving into Pittsburgh than not. Now, when I say that, people, if I convince you of that, the people who really sort of don't believe all this, the first thing they say is, well, yeah, someone's coming, but the young kids, they're all still leaving. All the young people, they're still leaving Pittsburgh. And that's why I had this slide here. It's out of order. I'm going to move it. I stole this slide from my friends up in Erie, even though it so perfectly encapsulates a lot of people around here who just sort of have this image that everyone of a certain age picks up and leaves Pittsburgh. And we have that mentality for two things. One of used to be true, but it's also sort of reflective of our new college dynamic. I mean, we are a big attractor of, Pennsylvania is the largest net attractor of college matriculants in the country. A lot of folks come here for college. It is normal and expected, and would be kind of strange if a lot of them didn't leave when they graduate. They come here for school and they leave. We actually do retain a lot of them. I don't think I left some slides in here that kind of point out this secondary issue that we actually do keep as many as we do. Doesn't mean that all the people that are graduating in all these different majors and all these different fields with all these different career aspirations all will find those opportunities here. A lot, some people say, my nephew wants to stay in Pittsburgh and wants a certain job. But if it's not something that Pittsburgh is good at, they're probably going to have to go somewhere else, find that job and a career, whereas other people graduating elsewhere are moving. So,
can I ask you, what
please.
is drawing people to Pittsburgh, and what are they working at?
It's another hour-long slide. I'm not sure where to start. I mean, look, I think relatively speaking, I mean, our job growth and unemployment rate here has been lower than the United States for the last 7 straight years. And that unemployment rate is generally reflective of the health of the labor market. So, I mean, again, so for 7 straight years, and it's the longest that's probably ever been true here in Pittsburgh since the 20s. The unemployment rate's lower here. What are they getting jobs in? I mean, like the bulk of the job growth has been in health and education for the most part. I mean, health and education has been growing continuously for the last 10 years in terms of jobs. Financial services was in the news today. That's certainly been sort of another, a third core of that. We talk a lot about high tech, and I'm a big fan. I think there are a lot of seeds of future growth. I'm not so sure we have the scale of commercial technology-driven jobs that's really at the core. Certainly, our friends at Google are sort of an exception to that rule. We have a lot of technology here, but a lot of that is embedded in the health and education sector for the most part. But I mean, continuous growth in jobs in health and education.
Is the gas and oil industry adding to this?
That's a big topic. I tell you what, when we're done, if you want to bring that up, I'm not sure what slides I have in here. We can come back to that at the end. And there's a little bit of where and when and how, and whether it's not potential or not. I mean, it's certainly not drill. They tried to drill in my neighborhood. I actually used to get. It's another whole topic. I actually got a little note from the oil drillers who were going to drill in Morrisville. I don't know where they got the idea that they were going to be able to drop a well in this hyper-dense part of the city. But there's certainly a lot of lawyers employed downtown in oil and gas industry. We'll hold that thought for the officer. I hit some bad button. This is all my fault. What did I do? So anyway, we're getting younger, not all young kids. Some neighborhoods are changing a lot. Immigration. So who's coming? So the slide I just put up of people coming, I'm talking about everyone. People moving here from New York, people here from Texas, people here moving here from Pakistan and Korea. It doesn't really matter. But this topic comes up a lot, and it's going to matter for the Squirrel Hill piece of this because there's a lot of diversity going up on here in Squirrel Hill. Some of you might know our good late friend Clark Thomas at the Post-Gazette. He was able to write a book like this 20 years ago, all the ethnic groups in Pittsburgh. There's our friends, the Tamburitsans. But if you look, my point here is, this is what we think is the ethnic diversity of Pittsburgh, and it is in a sense. But these folks didn't just come here on the boat. These are the grandchildren of the folks who came here 100 years ago. I mean, there's all these vast numbers, especially Eastern European diversity. I mean, really was a flow that was defining Pittsburgh in 1900, 1910. And really, the flows were very small after the fact. So we're not even talking about first generation, or second, or third generation folks. Nonetheless, that's the conception of Pittsburgh. Clark wound up not spending a lot of time on folks that weren't of European. I mean, did, but not as much from European places. I throw this up here because this is kind of interesting to me, at least. Of the folks who are born elsewhere, outside the United States, living here in the Pittsburgh region. This is for the region as well, not the city per se, but across the whole region. I've broken them up into folks who were born in Europe, folks who were born in Asia, and everywhere else. And so this purple line is the percentage of the folks. It's 1980, not that long ago. Doesn't seem that long ago to me, it's a little while ago. Go to 1980. 70% of the foreign-born in Pittsburgh were born in somewhere in Europe. 70%. Down here, almost 10% somewhere in Asia, and this green line is everywhere else. Now, in the rest of the country, this green line is really the story, because that includes South America and Hispanic migration has really been sort of defining flow the last couple of decades. Anywhere else in the U.S., pretty flat for us. But look at the European lines come down, the Asian lines come up just in the last couple of years. This is over the last 10 years. It seems pretty clear to me that we've now flipped that the majority, the largest group of foreign-born here in Pittsburgh are no longer born in Europe. And that's a trend that's been ongoing for a long time. Foreign-born in Pittsburgh, the largest group, collectively in Asia. Asia is a big part of the world, but certainly includes India, the subcontinent, Pakistan, China, and others. But the majority of foreign-born. Probably the majority now. I can't really say the majority, but if we extend this out a couple of years, it's probably there right now. I can probably honestly say right now in 2013, 2014, that the majority of the foreign born in Pittsburgh born in Asia. So we're going to ease in a little bit to just as, again, the point of this really to tell you how Squirrel fits into all these sort of different statistics. So here's the foreign born population with the best data I have, which is a little bit dated. So all these slides, I'm going to have the Pittsburgh region. That's why I put that slide up earlier, so you know what I'm talking about. Allegheny County, if you just want to think collectively about the county. The city of Pittsburgh, and then the two different flavors of Squirrel Hill, north and south. Foreign-born population, what percentage of our neighbors are born elsewhere? Pretty low numbers for the region, the county. These are relatively low for the U.S. as a whole. We're a place that has not had a lot of immigration in a long time. So the city and the region, 3% for the region, 4.6% for the county. The city is a little more, but really look at our neighbors here in Squirrel Hill. You know, this is probably one of the biggest concentrations of foreign-born population, where people who have born somewhere else come into the region. They had to come here at some point, choosing where to live. A lot of it's driven, not all of it. A lot of it's driven by the universities, the students, and the staffs that all choose to live here, but not all of it. I mean, I think it's collectively a place where people, find a friendly place to live, if you want to think of it that way. Same dynamic that was probably going on 100 years ago. New foreign-born immigrants coming here probably went to areas that they felt most comfortable with for a whole host of regions. So, just look how different either of the Squirrel Hill versions are, north or south, 16.6%. All more than twice, almost 3 times the city. 5 or 8 times what it is for the region as a whole. So a very different dynamic going on here than almost anywhere else in that 7-county region. I used to say the most diverse place in the city is, I try to find a picture of the 61C. I think that's actually the most diverse place in the city. If you get the 61C at about 8 a.m. on a weekday going into Oakland, you can probably hear a good dozen languages being spoken, which is pretty rare elsewhere in Pittsburgh, but pretty common. I couldn't find out that there's a 64, but it says Squirrel Hill up there. So there's a 60. I still think it's a fake bus, right? The 64, they just created that route a couple years ago, right? It seems kind of fake.
3 years ago.
3 years ago, so.
Is this last thought, is that comparable to most cities? I mean, like Cincinnati, those kind of Cleveland.
So I mean, the economic story of Pittsburgh, this is a place with a lot of job loss over the last 30 or 40 years. So we have been sort of very low on the flow of immigrants for quite a while. So this regional number is about as low as it gets in the U.S. For a region. For the county, for a large county, that's 4.6 is very low for a large urban county where typically there are a lot of recent immigrants. City of Pittsburgh, that's even low for an urban. Typically immigrants tend to be going to cities. That's not as true today as it was sort of 30 or 40 years ago. But these are all pretty low numbers. These numbers look more like the U.S. But it's a different, it's probably a different immigrant flow. So like I said, it goes back to, you saw back to this slide. I should probably put somehow fit up there slides of what the U.S. looks like. In the U.S., you'd see this green line shooting up, because that would include all the South American and Hispanic immigration. You see it, and that's really the dominant thing. The Europeans coming down everywhere. The green line would be coming up. The Asian numbers coming up, but probably not as much, except for here. Yes,
Chris,
sir.
a question that I know people in the audience are going to have. How are students treated in these numbers?
Well, so I started out that long ago. I mean, yes, students are people too. They get counted. All these numbers. That's what I'm saying. All these differences you see in Squirrel Hill North and South are reflective of the fact that you probably have a lot more of the students in Squirrel Hill North. So I mean, you live here. If you live here the bulk of the year, and the students by definition, if you're here a full year student, you count as residing here. People think we should treat them differently. We also count prisoners too. It's not really reflective here, but guess what? Folks downtown at the jail get counted in the census as well.
Is that a census number?
These
the
are
numbers you're talking about. How do you get the numbers?
These are. I usually have it labeled. It may not always be readable. I always have a reference. These are decennial census numbers every decade. Just a slightly different version of census numbers, but this is all from some semi-respectable source. So I only make up a few numbers. I do care a lot. So I mixed a little bit. I started to talk about people moving into the region and moving out collectively. People moving from New York or from Beijing, sort of the same. Then I flipped sort of not too subtly into international migration. Let's flip back and talk about what I call domestic migration, or people moving within the U.S. And so here's an interesting little metric of what percentage of our neighbors collectively were born outside of Pennsylvania. So at some point they born somewhere else in the U.S. They had to move here for whatever reason. Could have been last year. It could have been a long time ago. And so here's some numbers just to compare. Some 12, 14.7, 18.1% for the region, for the county, for the city as a whole. But now again, look at Squirrel Hill North and South. 41% of Squirrel Hill North. I don't know why that's not capitalized that way. Squirrel Hill North. Born outside Pennsylvania, clearly reflecting the fact that there's a lot of students. A lot of the students. A lot of our universities are very good bringing folks here from not only outside the world, but outside of Pennsylvania. They're coming here to go to school. But not only that, but the professional staffs that are coming here to work. If you're coming here to move, folks moving here to work at Google or even at UPMC or whatever. I mean, not the international immigration flow, but the domestic immigration flow. 41% of Squirrel North, probably should have benchmarked it here for you. It's probably as high as it gets anywhere in the city. A little lower, but still a pretty high number, 27% Squirrel Hill South. Again, these again compared to the city average, 18%, pretty high, and very high compared to anywhere else in the region. This is pretty much the same type of dynamic. I'm measuring people who have actually moved here in the last year. We don't need to get caught up on it, other than to say that, look, Squirrel Hill North and Squirrel Hill South are places that have a bigger chunk of folks who have moved here just over the last year. That's what this number is. So I would say, it goes to I told you the punchline before I started. People vote with their feet. I think these types of numbers reflect a healthy community. Folks coming in, they're looking for a place to live, they're looking for a place to settle down. Folks who make these moves typically have some freedom to choose where they want to live, and you're seeing sort of folks choosing to live in these places. Again, the higher difference between South and North is probably the students, but nonetheless, either way, it's a pretty high number than almost anywhere else in the city and the region. I can leave this up here. I don't want to get accused. I'm going to talk about positive stuff. There is sort of poverty everywhere, just to see how we all compare. Poverty numbers are a little, awfully difficult in the environment of here where the students are. Just so you know, it is actually an interesting point that if you're a student and you answer the survey, the census survey, that you have an income of a certain threshold, you can easily be caught up as being caught up in being in poverty. In a sense, even though a student who's living in poverty probably isn't the same thing as someone who's sort of not in that state by choice, right? You're temporarily a student, you don't have an income, might probably have some support elsewhere. That we don't really capture. We don't really measure poverty that well in the U.S., despite what you hear. Nonetheless, the Squirrel Hill neighborhoods are much lower than the city, but comparable to the region as a whole. What's that telling me? I think the only reason that Squirrel Hill North and South are even these numbers are that high is that along with households that are clearly not in poverty, you have a lot of, there are some folks, clearly some issues, some households, but you also have a lot of the students mixed in there. I think if you took them out, you'd have a number much lower for both Squirrel Hill North and South. So who's living here? A very quick look at education. So percentage of the population with a bachelor's degree or higher. Again, we're actually pretty, 28% for the region as a whole, 34% for Allegheny County, 33% for Pittsburgh, 80.9% Squirrel Hill North. So that's an extremely educated population. Squirrel Hill South just a little bit lower, 69.4. If you're here as a graduate student and you're living out here, well, you probably already have your bachelor's, so you're already captured by that. So this is about as high as it gets anywhere in the city or the region or anywhere in the country for that matter in terms of a neighborhood level metric. And to have 80% of your population, I don't have to measure those age 25 and over, really high. This goes with my diversity slide a little bit, just a quick look at what percentage of folks are of Asian ethnicity. Not quite the same as the migration slide. You could have ethnicity might be second generation, might be third. But again, Squirrel North and South sort of stand out a lot more from anywhere else in the region. I probably should have moved this slide up front, but it gets to this question of whether the students are being captured. If you're living in a dorm, you're in a group quarters. 30% of Squirrel North are folks living in some sort of group quarters, which is almost the dorms. I don't think there's a prison up there, as best I can tell. Might be a few folks who medically institutionalized, but not many. So really sort of a lot of students going on, but not in Squirrel South. So when you see these numbers, I usually say the difference between North and South is reflective of the students, but nonetheless, you usually still see something very different between Squirrel South and the city. So it's not a student answer for what's going on in Squirrel South for the most part, or at least not folks in dorms. You might have more folks who are here in school, living out in the community, but certainly not living in the dorms. A lot of those dorms up at CMU get captured in the Squirrel census tract, which is why you're really capturing such a big number there. I think I have a few slides here on transit stuff. North and South, these are folks who use public transit to get to work. Obviously the region as a whole, we're a driving country these days, not so high. Not too many people in the region as a whole are actually using public transit, 5.8%. A little higher for the county, 9.9, 10%, if you want to call it that. City's pretty high. It's still, not as high as it's higher than some cities, not as high as others. But Squirrel North and South, this looks low, 12.8%, but are they driving their cars to work? No, these folks, if they're not students, they could easily be walking down the street and getting into Oakland and that. So but still pretty high for Squirrel South public transit. I have to finish my walking slide. I'm going to skip that just for a minute. Had some old slides here. This is a map of the same date of who's using. I just thought this was kind of interesting. It does capture who's walking to work. You'll see some dark colors of the percentage of what neighborhoods people are really walking to work. You'll see the dark areas downtown. Obviously, still relatively few folks. We have more folks living downtown than in the past for sure, but still folks can walk downtown, bluff or uptown, depending on what you call it. Squirrel Hill still has probably one of the higher percentages of folks who walk to work. Again, probably because of the proximity to Oakland, you can get right down there, and if you live close enough, and whatever. So I have some benchmarking of that, just to see how you compare. Here's the highest percentage of folks who walk to work. Obviously Oakland, the kids are highest, but you're right. Squirrel North is right behind it. People bike to work. Any bikers in town here? Maybe not. High there as well. I just went around since it was historical society. People will talk about this. People forget how central Squirrel Hill is to the transit scheme here in town. I just like this. This is a picture of that came from the plan for the spine line, which was going to be connecting downtown to Oakland. Anyone remember that? We almost built it. We came awfully close. But what I point out here is this wasn't just about downtown and Oakland, if you remember. It was going to extend on past Oakland. The actual transit hub was going to be right, I keep forgetting where it was, but I think it was going to be right down the street here. It was really connecting downtown Oakland and really getting out to a transit hub that was going to be built really past the edge of Oakland, really pushing out here into Squirrel Hill. That's really been the central vector of commuting here in the city for an awfully long time. It may not be as true as much anymore. Certainly we've had a lot more, even since 1992, which is when we really came closest to building this. Probably a lot more people have moved north to Cranberry and south and west and into Washington County. But that was really probably one of the central bit of transit planning back in the day. I'm going to bounce around a little bit, and maybe we can follow up with questions as we go. So I think this is probably central to a lot of you. We just went through this trauma of reassessing property values. Anyone know how painful that was? This is a map of the colors. Again, people don't like red and green, so it's sort of like green is good, purple is kind of bad in terms of overall change in assessed value of homes. which is reflective of what probably has happened over the decade between the last assessment and this one. So, and the point is, a lot of green. I mean, look through Squirrel Hill, a lot of green, a lot of green. These means property values have gone up. I mean, I could put some harder numbers on that in different neighborhoods. Squirrel Hill probably has not seen the biggest percentage increases in property values across the city, but that's only because we have some other neighborhoods that were so low in value that just coming up into normal values, the percentage increases look pretty high. Squirrel Hill was able to retain a bit more of its equity in recent decades than a lot of other city neighborhoods. We still have some neighborhoods that are really challenged, just so you know. I mean, our neighborhoods up here in Homewood started out with low values and they've continued to go down. If you go south of the border, Beltsuver and some other neighborhoods here in the Hilltop neighborhoods are really still suffering, not seeing the sort of a price appreciation that you're seeing across the board in a lot of other city neighborhoods. And then a different mixed bag up here in the north, down by the river. There's been a lot of growth farther up into sort of the central north side, upper north side. Certainly, again, you'll see a little more of this purple, and things are pretty challenged. So again, look a bit darker green over here in Lawrenceville, and the price appreciation as a percentage has certainly been higher. But people don't quite realize all this positive press about Lawrenceville of late. People don't realize. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. It was a pretty depressed neighborhood in terms of certainly in terms of housing value and housing stock. So it's turned around a lot. So it looks like a bigger percentage change going over time. That's reflected in this type of measure. This is vacancy across the city in housing units. Usually has pretty close correlation. If housing markets are strong, you don't see a lot of vacancy. If things are bad, you see a lot of vacancy. These aren't great numbers for the city, 10%, 11% for the region, 11% for the county, 16% for the city, but down here, Squirrel Hill, these are a little higher than I actually expected to see, but still one of the lower housing unit vacancies. Some of that's just churn. You have a professional population, people moving in and out a lot. Some housing will be vacant while it's on the market. Nonetheless, still relatively least amount of vacancy here in the city. And I have a map of who's paying their taxes. Probably, if you're really interested in this, so you'll see the dark color is who's not. The darker the color, the bigger percentage of folks not paying their property taxes. It goes along. It's the same map as a lot of these others. You're all paying your taxes. So.
Does the sort of percentage of people not paying almost fit with declining assessment?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's sort of an interesting.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the
not
same
much to pay.
Well, yeah, no, if you go back to this, that's right. If you go look at this in Homewood, we spend a lot of time studying Homewood, trying to figure out the magic bullet to help them. It's not like most of these properties that are delinquent with their taxes. There's no one there.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That makes sense.
Completely dead parcels. The family's gone. It's been abandoned. Sure. Just real quick, you might appreciate this. I thought you guys would do this more. This is just a graphic of who's paying their taxes, where the city gets its property taxes from by neighborhood. The big one here is downtown. This big, huge block. The big buildings downtown, they pay taxes. Steel building has a big tax bill. So forget them. But if you look at all these other different bubbles, each one's a neighborhood. There's Squirrel Hill North, and these are the total. The numbers, if you actually were to read them, is the total assessed value that's collecting, the taxes are being collected on, not the actual tax collection. We're not getting $2.4 billion. Trust me, the city would love that, but they're not. But nonetheless, here's Squirrel North and South. Shadyside comes close. Squirrel North and South, these are really where the city's getting the bulk of their residential property taxes from. If you actually combine Squirrel North and South, it would be the biggest single block of property taxes collected by the city of Pittsburgh.
What about UPMC and Highmark? I don't see their bubble.
Moving on. And just so you know, this is a big picture thing. People like this picture. If you ever, a lot of folks have been through the years. I think this room probably is a crowd lived here quite a while, and you probably have noticed that elsewhere in the country in a couple of recent decades, housing values were booming. Granted, that all went south. But you might have always wondered why we didn't get the same price appreciation here. This is a graphic that again I've normalized to 1,000 back just about 7 years ago now. So all regions or the housing values were normalized. They might have different housing values, but I normalized them so they're all showing up here as 100 just 6 years ago, and how relatively housing values have changed in the top 25 metro areas going forward. And so that red line is Pittsburgh, and there's everywhere else. These bottom lines, just so you know, going from 100 down here to 50. I didn't label what Las Vegas and Phoenix are. I think the bottom two for sure. They've lost half their value. So if you felt bad that you weren't getting the price appreciation that everyone else you were reading about for a decade or two, well, yeah, there's them and here's us. So you made the right choice in the long run not to buy in Phoenix and stay here. And for all that, I'll be glad to follow up on all those things. I just want to give you a few thoughts on make this all a little more, tie this all together in a little bit. So yeah, that's I have no idea will ever look like that. But here's the thing. What's anyone know what that is?
Yeah,
Hazelwood.
It is now the Almano site, and I like this picture because you can almost just see, you can kind of see everything, the smoke. Where's it going? Right up the hillside. Where are we? I mean, it just we're probably right up in here, right? I mean, it's a coke plant, an old coke plant. The history of that coke plant goes back, longer than anyone in this room, I guarantee you. And not the greatest thing. This is a study that was done in 1989. Anyone have anything to do with this study? I'd love to hear from you. But these are folks who went out. It looks like an engineering study. Any neurologist in the room or neuroscientist? What we know about smell is apparently not quite well defined. So this was an engineering study, but there's no engineering behind it. They sent people out to smell the air all through the East End here to see where those fumes were going. It's really funny, the list of things they were smelling, like burnt eggs, burnt sulfur, this, that. It was just sort of these graphical descriptions, but it really stretched all the way through the East End. So I go back to all these pictures of stability and growth and change. That's happening even though we're sitting, for a lot of those years, this plant only closed. This is the last basic steel operation in the city of Pittsburgh, right? 1998. Many of you might know the whole history better than me. When it closed, it was the last basic steel operation in the city of Pittsburgh. There was briefly talk of putting another coke plant in there. Some opposition. The school district actually refused to grant a TIF to Suncoke to come in and build a new coke plant going forward. So I find it rather amazing, especially now there's some stuff in the news today that 8 states are suing some upwind states for all the bad air that's floating from the west to the east. That somehow Squirrel Hill, which is really sort of in the affluent area of all this, whatever's coming out of this plant, maintain that type of stability. So going forward, with it not being there, and it takes some time to go forward for things to grow and change. I think a lot of the recent positive aspects of living in the city really reflect just this one plant. And that's not a broad statement. I'm not opposed to industrial growth and zoning. All these things are very important. But this was a unique pathology to have a coke plant in an urban area. You just don't do this anymore. There's no way you would ever do that ever again. And it's only there because its history was so long that
Is that the new development?
Yeah, this is all what is the Almano. I'd have to sort of get my whole bearings here, but yeah, up toward this way, clearly the Almano site. As you get down, of course, their town up here. That's 2nd Avenue way down here, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of that's always been developed. The 2nd Avenue site, quote unquote, named the Pittsburgh Technology Center. There's a lot of different stuff going on there. They had a horrible time redeveloping that because of what they found in the ground there. It wasn't just all environmental problems from these old brownfield sites aren't the same, and there were some heavy metals in there from some old gasification plants that they only discovered down there. Really, really scary stuff. Took some time to redo. So I really think that the changes within the city in terms of quality of life and livability have only begun to be impacted, and that's why I really think again, there's an argument right now, and I get into this. I don't think we really have enough data to really say conclusively. The city of Pittsburgh has been in a population decline for about 70 years. give or take. And yeah, it's really funny. The one little bit of data that popped out recently, really an estimate, wasn't that hard a bit of data. It was like maybe there was like 5 more people in the city of Pittsburgh than the year before, something like that. And people just fall over themselves. News stories, this, that. I'm like, it may not be true, but whether it's true or not, I mean, it's certainly not. It certainly seems to be the case that there's not the free fall or even the decline that there was. And if you really sort of extrapolate to some of the growth that we do see in sort of new housing developments, we probably do have, at least some uptick going on right now in terms of the city of Pittsburgh's population. I'll end with just one thing. I usually go through my economic spiel. This is a little more local. And to do my economic spiel, I have all this history that really is quite depressing, right? We've all lived through it in terms of where the jobs went, how many we lost, how many we left. I usually have people so depressed that I have to say it could be worse. 1950, this was a whole week-long series in the Post-Gazette, and they, duck and cover, remember that, somehow you could have this as a front page A1 story that we were all going to be safe in Pittsburgh, just hiding in the hills from the bombs as they went off in our insole brick insulated houses, which probably did offer more protection than a lot of other things. So, some people think the world's ending. I always think, I just can't quite imagine sort of waking up and having this be what I worry about every day. So, so we go from there. I end with this is my final end, and I'll be glad to take as many questions as we have time for. So this is my good friends at the Post-Gazette. Threw this picture up. I stole it from them. But I love this picture, right? Because you could do all of the changes in the city of Pittsburgh from this one picture, right? What was this before? Steel building. Well, my 17-year-old nephew came through town, and he's like, the UPMC building. I'm like, no! But why would he call it anything else, right? U.S. Steel's gone. They are a tenant. They're threatening to move. The golf building, golf's long gone, right? Got that. Golf's been gone. It's not like golf's been gone recently. Golf's been gone 30 years. Coming up in 2014, 1984, golf shut down completely. What's this building? Well, it's Highmark, it's health insurer. Probably that PPG kind of messes up the story a little bit. There's still a PPG building, but they're all glass and stuff, so it's kind of funky. And that's not really true. If you actually know the story, the PPG building, Henry Hillman sold it. So the PPG might be in there as a tenant, but it's now owned by a southern real estate investment firm. And it's an interesting story unto itself. They had some money to spend, they wanted to invest it, they were looking around, they didn't see a lot of great real estate markets, and they really placed it in this high, I don't know they have to bring in the name, High Woods, whoever it is, they looked around, weren't seeing any good investment opportunities almost anywhere that they normally invested in a lot of different areas through the South, and wanted to move beyond it, and they really say they did a very scientific market study and said this was the place to be, and their first big purchase was to go and talk to Henry Hillman, who's looking to divest, it's that time, and bought all of PPG Place and a bunch of other things in town reflective of what they think is going on in the Pittsburgh market. So then there's our nuclear reactors and stuff going on. I think that's my last picture, so I'll be glad to take as many. I admit that's a little bit of a hodgepodge stuff. I opened up a lot of things, so we can talk about anything you want whatsoever, but that's all. Yes, please.
I have a house.
What's it worth? I'm sorry, yes.
No, I'm still depressed over the assessment. But anyway, I have a house over here that was built in 1907.
Yes.
Where would the livery stable?
My house was born. My house over in Friendship was built in 1910. I see no evidence of horses there either. So
I'm wondering, were there still wagons? Were there still horses in the area? Have they all been taken over by cars already? No.
So now you're outside my realm, but given what you do, I'm going to connect Michael with when we're done. Is my colleagues do a lot more with historical maps. We do a lot of mapping, and there's some great historical map sites that people have taken every historical map of Pittsburgh, and you can go online and look at the 1910 maps and identify all the stuff that was there. I don't think that'll answer that question, but
There's a professor at CMU, Joel Carr, who wrote a
Joel.
book called The Horse in the City. He studied the working horses in different cities, including Pittsburgh.
I thought I knew all of Joel's stuff, though. I did not know that, so when I see
But
it
I'm
next.
talking about people that own the houses.
Well, if you wanna see a map of where the livery stables
Where the-
were, I'm sure.
Well, the central livery stables, you're saying that for each house. There are,
They would have had their own.
I only know a few
But
carriage
there'd be
houses.
trolleys and all,
Yeah, they
I mean, there'd be
wouldn't have
for
had
less,
their horses.
I mean, I think houses were sort of, horses were more for like milk trucks and it was almost a commercial need, maybe some people would have them, but.
Up here, I appreciate the question for up here in Squirrel, there's probably already, down near the river valleys where the, sort of the blue collar workers are, they walk to work, yeah, they weren't on horses. I mean, although there's some interesting stories, if you read of the stories of the Homestead Steel Plant and back in the day, you know, even back then, some of the steel workers were making a lot of money, you'd see some of these stories of like, some of those guys being delivered in horses, it's all kind of a strange dynamic, but by and large, 100 years ago, all the concentration of work, people were walking, that's why we all live.
Or can I ask the question, what was the basic mode of transportation in Squirrel Hill at 1907?
Streetcar.
Trains. There was a vast, Pittsburgh really had this great, not just Joel, but, well, Joel in particular, but Ted Muller and Joel and those guys, you know, these eastern, Squirrel Hill at one point was an eastern suburb of the city of Pittsburgh, right? I mean, the early train lines were out here, right? You know, I mean, the streetcars, but really before that, I mean, the train lines, these were sort of the early trolley suburbs in the US out here. So I think a lot of people were, they really weren't the Fricks and the Clays and the folks who really probably did have a few carriage houses in town, were probably getting on a train-like thing. You know, I think from here out to Churchill, my friends in Churchill, like I told him this, he didn't believe me. He said, "Oh, now I understand why that old train station's there." You know, I mean, there was a vast trolley, you know, light rail, not light rail, but rail networks. And trolley too. I just don't think we call it light rail then, but yeah, absolutely. Our trolley. Well, the trolley. We put in the. I mean, I love the story, right? We have a subway now. Everyone remember when they built our subway system? They actually didn't. They got all the money. They finally built it. They didn't have money for the actual cars, right? What did we run on our modern light rail subway system for the first bunch of years?
Trolleys.
The old trolleys. Which messed up to no end because our trolley gauge, our light rail gauge is different from anywhere else in the country. Why? Because of this lack of money, they had to build our light rail subway thing to a gauge to match the trolleys. The Pittsburgh Railroad trolley gauge was before this was built before the rest of the country started to standardize on gauges. It was a unique rail gauge. So think of that history if you want to tie it all together. And that causes us great cost to this day. So when we want to replace rail cars, they've got to be custom, you know, rail
They
gauges.
have to be. We have the broad gauge, Philadelphia, and New Orleans are the only three with this particular close gauge.
So I'm just.
Within an inch or two of the difference.
I'm just an amateur, so yeah, there you go, there's the answer, yeah, I just know it costs more money, that's all I can tell you now, it cost me money because 100 years ago, Pittsburgh was ahead of its time, so, it's a great Pittsburgh mythology.
There was an article in the paper recently about a woman that Peduto hired to maintain sustainability. I don't know if you noticed that.
I think the story was of Deborah Lamb, which is the chief innovator, my colleagues are doing a lot more with that than me, certainly we live and breathe this issue of open data for the system, our neighbor and community information systems are a big part of, we hope, of what's going to go forward, so I don't know Miss Lamb myself, my colleagues are working with her more.
What she was trying to do, is that to make sure that communities stay stable?
I can't speak to everything she's going to do, but I would say that on most, I live and breathe a data world. You know, there's all this data that you want to be using for policy or whatever. We can probably make improvements on everything here in Pittsburgh, so I think that's the short answer. Yes, sir.
One phenomena which may mess up the official statistics on horses.
Okay.
I believe that by the late 30s, and milk was still delivered door to door in those days.
I remember the Turner milk truck. I'm not that old.
Yeah, most of the milk delivery companies had converted to trucks. When World War II came along and gasoline was rationed, a lot of them reverted back to the horse and wagons.
Really?
And this was up until the late 40s, some of them still delivered milk by horse.
I get accused of talking about many different topics that I claim to be a semi-expert in, but you guys have just blown past me. I am not an expert in the propensity to use horses in Pittsburgh. I hate to say that. Is there a non-horse question? Yes.
I'd like to get your input on the proposal of redevelopment in Hazelwood.
You want to narrow that question down some?
What's the question?
So look, I mean, there's no opinion on what. So I mean, I would just tell you, maybe I'll just answer broadly of this question of brownfield redevelopment has been just the center of effort here in the region for a long time, right? I mean, we overbuilt all these river valleys, we clogged up all the land, with all this industrial, worked great for a century, and then when all those closed, we were left with these vast industrial artifacts that need to be cleaned up and moving forward, and it's taken a lot of time and effort and money and luck and hard work to get some of them to be redeveloped. So you know, the Homestead site, the South Side Work site, and stuff like that. It's that we've done so much is a bit impressive unto itself. I think we're just getting around to, again, what that last site, the Almano site, the last basic steel operation in the city of Pittsburgh. So while we were already moving on, tearing some other stuff down, they were going on another whole decade and moving forward. We are working a lot with the folks down there from the standpoint of, I mean, look, so the folks at the RDC have the site, it's got a plan, it's already going, it doesn't really matter what my opinion of that is. The issue going forward is how that redevelopment impacts the neighborhood. Hazelwood itself is a neighborhood that has certain challenges. So my colleagues more than me are working a lot with the community groups in Hazelwood to at least get do what we can to integrate how that development happens with growth and change in the neighborhood itself. So it's not really an answer. I mean, it's certainly ongoing. It doesn't matter what my opinion is. It's moving on. The commitment's there from the foundations that have put money up, from the RIDC and the city. So that shovels are moving. So in some sense, a large part of it will happen at this point, no matter what. The full picture, I think, will be evolving over a long time.
Over here. You'd made a comment about that the United States, I guess, or some groups don't do a very good job measuring poverty. And I'm wondering if you want to point out anything in particular, whether it's, tends to skew one way or another, or whatever you might want to say. I just found that interesting.
Well, yeah, look, I once had a whole graduate class, not in poverty, right? People studying poverty forever, just in the measurement of poverty.
Mm-hmm.
It was a long time ago. Just so you know, the standard metric for poverty in the U.S. is, I mean, it's consistent. A couple decades ago, a U.S. Department of Agriculture economist decided what it costs to feed a family of a certain size, and they said, well, what's the poverty level? They said, just a bit arbitrarily, 3 times that food basket cost is the poverty level. So at its core, it's a bit arbitrary. The problem is that poverty number, whatever you come up with that number, X dollars per year for a family of a certain size, is the same here in Pittsburgh as it is in New York City. Now, if any of you have been to New York City in a while and know what it costs to live in New York City, I would imagine some of us who have pretty decent incomes here in Pittsburgh probably would be quite impoverished living in Manhattan. I don't need to talk about it anymore to say that right there is flawed. There are a bunch of other reasons. Again, the student issue is something a lot of places don't think about because you don't have a high concentration of students. This really just isn't an issue. Here in Pennsylvania, State College, Pennsylvania shows up as this huge concentration of poverty. Yeah, they're all drinking beer all night long. So I mean, it's not. I mean, it's a different type of poverty than chronic, multi-generation, all these other issues. So. If you want me to save the next 3 hours to answer, I'll do that.
Well, I guess there's also the issue that line is so crucial for so much of what is spent on in federal and state budgets and different agencies working with them and so on. So it becomes it's very important in our society, however flawed it might be.
Yes. Over here, anyone? In the back, please.
Does Squirrel Hill tend to take its neighbors with it? So do the numbers in Greenfield compare, and do they flow along? And well, I guess Oakland is kind of a different entity, but other neighborhoods that are around.
Well, I mean, so in the big picture, certainly, I think I'll go back and just tie this a little bit to our painful assessment issue. So I've talked to folks over years working with the assessment. You know, what is interesting about Pittsburgh, we all live, you know, is that we tend to live on top of each other in a unique way, right? You can have a very affluent neighborhood or part of a neighborhood next to a neighborhood that's not. And the distance, the physical distance between those type of areas can be very different. So in that sense, you know, it's not that far from Squirrel Hill to home, right? I mean, the physical distance from walking from the center of Homewood into Point Breeze is by most measures trivial. Yet, you know, in terms of housing values, you know, the gradient's quite steep. So clearly not as much as you would expect if you were just thinking, you know, broadly. So. But you know, clearly, there's the vote goes up, vote goes down. The city of Pittsburgh, certainly as things get better in the region, you know, eventually there's sort of spillover effects that go forward. But no, I think we're a long way from sort of all boats being floated. That's where we're going with that.
What's the element of future studies? I mean, this is past. What do you plan on doing, say, for the next 5 years on this subject?
Well, so look, I do forecasting. I mean, we'll put out maybe the next few months our population forecast for the region. That's not really going to tell you all that much. Like I said, I probably don't spend, none of my colleagues spend as much time talking about Squirrel Hill just because it's not so many problems, right? You don't need to study. We're really trying to get ahead of the curve of neighborhood change. Again, there are neighborhoods that are sort of evolving because of demographics. There are whole neighborhoods that had such a high concentration of elderly people. They didn't move out. They stayed in their homes for 4 years. There's this metric of like census usually asks a question of how long you've lived in your current home. In 5 years, 10 years, there's a maximum amount, 40 years or more. For forever and ever, Pittsburgh is always ranked #1, however you cut it out, of the most folks who have lived in their current home the longest period of time. It's off the chart. Well, guess what? That can't go on forever. Right, and so I think what you've seen in places like Lawrenceville, which was a place that was a lot of folks who had stayed in Lawrenceville were there in 1990 and 2000, are households and families that had been there forever. And guess what? A lot of them aren't there now. The 25% decline in the population 65 and over in Lawrenceville over the last 10 years. That is, demographics usually is an evolutionary process. Things go a little slow. You know, you notice the trends here. That's a dramatic shift for a particular neighborhood going forward. So I think a lot of our work is trying to help neighborhoods evolve. Some neighborhoods, as they go through that type of shift, can remarket themselves, attract some new folks, and others, you know, either can't or aren't. And trying to how to manage that type of change is probably the #1 thing sort of we deal with, and whether that's future studies or not. But I mean, it's all helping neighborhoods evolve through that transition. And Squirrel, I think it's not an issue in Squirrel. I think Squirrel has maintained a certain stability, and a lot of institutions, that you guys included, you know, do a lot to maintain the viability. This is a place to live, so I don't think anyone thinks that's going to change. If anything, it is. It's not. I actually think it's not that. Well, Squirrel Hill, what's going on in Squirrel Hill is actually impacting the folks around it. I think Squirrel Hill is going to be one of those places that benefits the most. If the city as a whole becomes a great place to live, we've had so little building investment here for so long. I think what's happening, if you ever notice, I think our housing values are going up. You might not like your assessment, but it's actually a good thing. You might not like the tax bill, but I mean, our housing values have gone up. I mean, I think just that normal flow, even this small number. So this is not a big turnaround in migration, but you know, it's had their Econ 101. All pricing is at the margin. You know, we've had so little housing stock built here in the city of Pittsburgh that we have probably the oldest housing stock in the country here in the city of Pittsburgh as a city. And the places that are older, I've never been to Boston. I have friends who live in Beacon Hill in Boston. It's up where Teresa Carey lives. It's old housing stock, but guess what? They've had a sensitive investment in that. Our old housing stock is like, you know, physical old versus real old. Ours is really old. You know, there's no, and so there's not a lot of the folks who are moving. These are not big numbers, folks moving in, but they're not finding places they want to live in. And if you're a young professional person coming to Pittsburgh for a professional opportunity, knowing a 3 or 5 year thing before you move on to something else. You know, people sometimes say, well, they can buy a great cheap place in Hazelwood for that matter, but they don't have time or inclination to spend their next 5 years fixing it up, right? They want a place to live that's of a certain quality. There's not so much of it here, you know, and that's why I think you're seeing a lot of sort of good marketing. If you pay attention to the real estate markets, the housing values in general have been going up, but what's really gone nuts for those of us who lived here all our lives, it's just kind of odd. Anything new that's newly built is worth a fortune here in this town. And that's why I think you're seeing some infill, urban infill. Again, Squirrel Hill, not an issue in Squirrel Hill, but other parts, Lawrenceville. There's construction in Lawrenceville that just seems awfully bizarre to me, going back. So, there's a lot going on, is sort of the short answer. Anyone more over there?
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're done.
Couple of things, your question about what was the mode of transportation. One of the things our research turned up with is that this is really probably the youngest neighborhood in the city and did not really develop till the trolley came along, large parts of it. So it wasn't like the trolley replaced water transportation or horse transportation. It was, a lot of it was farmland until the trolley opened it up. And so it really is seen as the major beginning in terms of transportation mode for the community. The Pittsburgh area is widely known in the multifamily housing field as having had the least amount of multifamily housing development from 1990 to 2000 of any metro area in the country, just to support the kind of comments. Thank you for coming out on a cold night. Happy holidays. Join us in January on the mansions of Fifth Avenue. And thanks, Emerson.